For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affections. And for those who come to seek a path, may a way be found, and the courage to take it step by step. Today's reading is an excerpt from the Reverend Forrest Church's book, Cathedral of the World. Forrest Church was the senior pastor of All Souls Unitarian Church in Manhattan until he died a few years ago. Cathedral of the World. Imagine awaking one morning from a deep and dreamless sleep to find yourself in the nave of a vast cathedral. Like a child newborn, untutored, saved to moisture, nurture, rhythm, and the profound comforts at the heart of darkness, you open your eyes upon an unseen world. Indeed, unimaginable world. It is a world of light and dancing shadows, stone and glass, life and death. This second birth, at once miraculous and natural, is in some ways not unlike the first, a new awakening. It consecrates your life with sacraments of pain you do not understand and promised joy you will never fully call your own. Welcome to the Cathedral of the World. Above all else, contemplate the windows. In the Cathedral of the World, there are windows without number, some long forgotten, covered with many patinas of grime, others revered by millions, the most sacred of shrines. Each in its own way is beautiful. Some are abstract, others representational. Some dark and meditative, others bright and dazzling. Each window tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humankind, the mystery of death. The windows of the cathedral are where the light shines through. Because the cathedral is so vast, our time so short, and our vision so dim, over the course of our pilgrimage, we are able to contemplate only a tiny part of the cathedral, explore a few apses, reflect upon the play of darkness and light through only a few of its windows. Yet by pondering and acting on our ruminations, we discover insights that will invest our days with meaning. A 21st century theology based on the concept of one light and many windows offers its adherents both breadth and focus. One light, many windows. Honoring multiple religious approaches, it only excludes the truth claims of absolutists. That is because fundamentalists claim that the light shines through their window only. Skeptics draw the opposite conclusion. Seeing the bewildering variety of windows and observing the folly of the worshipers, they conclude there is no light. But the windows are not the light. They are where the light shines through. We shall never see the light directly, only as refracted through the windows of the cathedral. Prompting humility, life's mystery lies hidden. The light is veiled, yet being halfway in size between the creation itself and our body's smallest constituent part, that we can encompass with our minds the universe that encompasses us is cause for great wonder. Awakened by the light, we stand in the cathedral, trembling with awe. One light, many windows. Forrest Church's Cathedral of the World. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Those are the words of Unitarian minister Reverend Theodore Parker, who was a strict abolitionist who used to write sermons with a loaded pistol on his desk. One of our famous forefathers in our Unitarian faith. So now we have a time to answer some questions. I hope this is fun. I hope it's informative. We will see. I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
That's a fact.
I might defer some questions to Dan. I don't know. We'll see.
So this is a great start, a great lead to a lot of really good questions. I'm humbled to be reading those, so thank you for letting me participate today. So there's multiple questions, Peter. It says, what do UUs believe? Are UUs still Unitarians? Are UUs still Universalists? Or are these names part of an historical lineage that is no longer relevant?
Wow. All right. So
Hey,
how long do you want to be
there,
here?
right?
How long do you want to stay this afternoon? Yes or no?
Yeah, yes, no, maybe. Yes.
So,
What do UUs believe is the leading question?
Yeah, what do UUs believe?
Or do you want to start with, are UUs still Unitarian, Universalists, and are these a lineage that's no longer relevant?
So Unitarianism and Universalism are our roots. We started out as two different denominations, the Unitarians and the Universalists, both related to both Christian faiths originally, and we merged in 1961 to become Unitarian Universalists. So everybody just has that as background. The Unitarians were people who essentially said God is one. They believed in the unity of God, that God did not exist in three persons, but rather in one being, as opposed to the Trinitarians who believe God was composed of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit. So the Unitarians said God is one. The Universalists said God is a loving God. The nature of God is such that God would never condemn humans to an infinite punishment for something they did during their lifetimes. And so we believe that all human beings will eventually go to heaven, all be reconciled with God. So universal salvation is where the term universalist comes from. So Unitarians, God is one. Universalists, all are saved. We've come a long way from that sort of set of beliefs. And in some ways, we could very easily say the terms Unitarian and Universalist don't apply to where we are today. We are in many ways a congregation that is certainly post-Christian. We're no longer a strictly Christian church, although we may get to this later. If you're Christian, you're welcome here. But in some ways, Unitarian and Universalism is a vestige of the past. But I think it's important that we hold on to our history, that we hold on to our past, and that although you may be here not believing in a God at all, maybe you don't believe in heaven at all, so a loving God in the way it was thought of as a universalist doesn't make sense to you. We do have this link with our past, and Unitarian Universalism in our name helps us to hold on to that link to the past. What do Unitarian Universalists believe? I could ask every one of you in this room what you believe, and we'll get a variety of answers. I think that we share a common understanding of how we want to be in the world. It's not necessarily what we believe that's important, but it's how we want to be in the world. And I think a couple of weeks ago in my sermon, I talked about, rather than asking, what do you believe, the more important question to ask is, what sustains you? Why do you get up in the morning? What keeps you going when times are rough? And so, Unitarian Universalists hold a variety of beliefs and understandings about why we're here and what life is all about. And I think that to get bogged down in the question of what we actually believe, that's going to tend to separate us more than bring us together.
So this is a follow-up. The question is, are UUs Christians?
Good question. So there are some people who consider themselves Christian who are Unitarian Universalists. For the most part, a Unitarian Universalist Christian, and I'm not going to. I want to make sure people understand this is not a rule. It's not a hard and fast, black and white kind of thing. Most people who claim to be Christians and Unitarian Universalists would say they don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that God came down to earth and became incarnate, became human. But people who call themselves Unitarian Universalist Christians oftentimes will say, I believe in the teachings of Jesus. And the teachings of Jesus are something that I follow. And therefore, Jesus is a guide to me, a teacher, and therefore I call myself a Christian.
So then how can we have a faith without a central figure?
Come on.
somebody put a bowl of water and St. Peter can walk on water?
So without a central figure, you mean without God? Is that the question? Without a central figure?
Central figure is the question.
Without a central figure. So there are a lot of faith traditions that aren't based on an understanding of God as a person or God as a thing. It doesn't have God at the center. You think about Buddhism. Buddhists don't worship Buddha; they follow the Buddha. Earth-centered traditions that are based on nature and the changing seasons and the sun and the moon don't have a central figure that they worship. So there are many faiths that don't have a figure at the core of their beliefs.
So there are several questions that are related to questions about evil, and I think this question represents those well. What does our faith say when terrible things happen to good people?
Why terrible things happen?
What does our faith say when terrible things happen to good? And several other questions were, why do terrible things happen to good people?
Our faith says that love will overcome evil. It says that we are committed to the belief that love will cast out fear, love will help us to survive. We don't deny the existence of evil, but we do make a commitment as Unitarian Universalists to work to counter evil in the world. And that while evil exists, it's a reality of the world, we are challenged to confront it where we can, to overcome it where we can, and to help each other to survive the bad things that happen. And that, to me, that's perhaps the primary purpose of religious community, is to be together to help each other get through the bad times when something bad happens. And so we don't know why it happens, but we know it happens. We know life is hard, and we're here to help each other through it. That's the purpose of our religious community.
So what is the difference between the principles and the sources? I don't understand how to use the sources.
How to use the sources. Okay, so everybody grab a gray hymnal, and in one of the first pages, before the hymns start, you will see a page that has bold at the top. It says, "We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote." And you'll see it states our 7 principles, which start with the inherent worth and dignity of every person and ends with respect for the interdependent web. And then it goes on to say the living tradition we share draws from many sources. And it lists 6 different sources here. And I would say that these are just representative, that we draw from other sources as well. So our principles, the 7 principles, talk about how we are in the world, how we aspire to be, what's important to us as Unitarian Universalists. The purposes, which are these sources, direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder, words and deeds of prophetic women and men, etc. The sources say that we can draw inspiration from a variety of sources. We don't have one holy book. We don't have one particular source that says this is what we need to follow, this is what we need to believe. We can have personal experiences that are valid, experiences of the divine or the holy. We can look to how other people have lived for inspiration. We can believe in science and the rational part of our brains. So the principles are about how we are, and the sources are where we gain our inspiration.
That makes sense?
Make sense?
Okay, all right. You're still with me, Peter.
Okay, I hope so.
Good. All right. So we have a lot of questions about God. How can you worship God and hold your faith when church doesn't acknowledge Him? Please, He's slipping away. So there's a question about God. The other questions are where and what is God in Unitarian Universalism, and how does Jesus fit in? And how do UUs deal with the issue of God, especially if they don't believe in God? So you hear you hear the wrestling.
The tension.
The tension.
Sure,
yeah.
sure. So, one of the treasures of Unitarian Universalism is that we can be together in one community holding a variety of beliefs. And one of those things that is most contentious, I think, in a lot of our communities is around the question of who or what is God. What's most important, I think, in religious community, in our religious communities, is that we talk to each other about this stuff. And not just sit with our own understanding, satisfied with whatever it is, whether it's I believe in God and God is like this, or there is no God and I don't need a God. If we stay in our silos, in our smokestacks, and just hold our beliefs to ourselves, then we're not helping each other learn and grow. And so one of the tasks of our communities, Unitarian Universalist churches, is to create opportunities and space and to create safety and trust to allow us to share our differences of belief. And to say that you believing one thing and me believing another is okay. And that by having a conversation, being in dialogue, being in relationship with each other is how we're both going to grow. I'm not going to try to convince you that my way is the right way. I want to understand where you're coming from, and I want you to listen and hear where I'm coming from. And so we're unique in this regard, in that we don't tell people what you have to believe about any particular aspect of our faith. But what we do say is, and this is one of our principles, one of the 7 principles, we engage in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So it's free in that we can believe what we want to believe, but it's responsible in that we have a responsibility to share it with others, but not impose it on others. To be open to other ways of thinking and other ways of being informed and connecting with each other and with the world. So you can believe that God is a being that has some power in the world. You can believe that God doesn't exist. And you can believe that God is some undefined mystery that we'll never really understand. You can hold all of these different beliefs in this congregation, and all of that is okay, and we remain in community with each other, and we don't try to convince each other that one is right and one is wrong. The point is we're all trying to figure it out, and the best way to figure it out is to figure it out together, in conversation, in community.
So you're touching on two things that some of us would like a clearer definition on, and that is what is humanism and theism.
So theism, generally speaking, is a belief in the existence of a God. Humanism, which was a movement that became very active and almost dominant in our Unitarian Universalist congregations through the mid and late 20th century, says that human beings can be good without God, and that we don't need to believe in a God in order to be good. So humanism is a faith statement that says that we have the power as human beings to solve the world's problems, to care for each other, and be good people without having to believe in the existence of a God.
That was helpful. So how similar are Unitarian Universalist churches to each other, and to what extent are we beholden to be guided by the UUA?
Wow, these are great questions. So how many people here have been members of or regularly attended another UU congregation besides this one? Can I just see a show of hands? So how similar or different are congregations? I see very different. Every congregation, every UU congregation has its own culture, its own history, its own feel, I think. And that is largely, in some ways, determined by its history and by its current ministry. We have some things in common. I don't know of a UU church that doesn't light a chalice in its worship service. I don't know of a UU church that doesn't sing hymns. There are some. If you walk into another UU church, there will be some things that are familiar to you, but it'll feel different, and each congregation feels different because each congregation is independent. So the UUA unlike in the Catholic Church, you have the papacy in Rome who tells you what it is you have to do or be or how you are. The Unitarian Universalist Association is an association of congregations. It exists as our independent congregations coming together, and the UUA is there to provide services to the congregations. It's not to tell us what to do or how to be. So the UUA has no control over the independent congregations. The UUA is there, hopefully, to serve our needs and to be a way that we can communicate with each other and be in community with other congregations.
So who designed and built this beautiful church?
That's a good question. Who designed this church? Who was here when it was built? Dennis and Martis, you were here. But this building, we're asking about who built. Is it the physical church that people are asking about? This sanctuary was built 14 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't know who the architect was. The real question is who built this church. The people of the church built this church. That's the answer. I mean, and the people who are here now are the church.
So is our denomination shrinking? How many Unitarian Universalists are there in the U.S., and is that number changing at all?
The number is remaining relatively constant, which means that it's declining in relevance to the general population of the country. There are about 200,000. Is about 200,000 now Unitarian Universalists. There are about 1,100 congregations. We are not losing membership as quickly as many of the mainline denominations are. Mainline Protestant traditions are losing members faster than we are, but we're also not growing. And we are welcoming new people. I love seeing the yellow name tags because it means that there are new folks experiencing us. We are, I would say, kind of holding our own right now.
So when did the idea of shared ministry come about, and how do you demonstrate your faith in congregants? So let's start with the first one. How did the idea of shared ministry come about? What is shared ministry, Peter? So
shared ministry means that everything that we do, all of us in our congregation, is ministry. So if you recall, we refer to ministry teams within this church, and one of the reasons for that is to remind us that music is a ministry, and pastoral care is a ministry, and even stewardship is a ministry. The people who care for our building, all of that is a ministry. It's a way that we are ministering to caring for each other. So that's what's meant by shared ministry. Ministry isn't just what the minister does.
Okay. And how do you demonstrate your faith? And your faith in us as congregants?
How do I demonstrate my faith?
How does the world know you're a Unitarian Universalist?
That sounds like a different question.
How do you demonstrate your faith?
Is this in shared ministry?
I think it's a separate question.
Okay, I'm confused. So when did the idea of shared ministry come about? Okay. How do you demonstrate your faith in congregants? Wow. By letting you ask the questions, I guess. There are so many different ways in which all of you support this congregation, and everything that you do to contribute to it is a form of ministry. So keeping this church running, having it do what it does in the world, that's all about what all of you do. I just get to stand up here on Sunday morning and talk and maybe sort of point us in a direction, but it's when you all respond to that's shared ministry, and that's how we're acting out our faith in the world. Every Sunday now when I talk about a service opportunity, and there has been fewer than a half a dozen times when I have not gotten a response from a service opportunity since we started it in the fall. Every time somebody responds to that is shared ministry. That is a demonstration of how you all are living out Unitarian Universalism.
So what's a UU elevator speech?
A UU elevator speech. All right, so a few years ago, the president of the UUA said we should all be able to describe what Unitarian Universalism is in the time it takes to take an elevator from like the 10th floor to the ground floor of a building. So, think about it. It's like an extended bumper sticker, I guess. And so for several years, we were all talking about let's work on our elevator speech. So if you meet a stranger and somebody says, "What's Unitarian Universalism?" you can tell them Unitarian Universalism is a blah 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 blah. And it was an interesting experiment, but I don't think it worked very well because it's hard to describe who we are and why we are Unitarian Universalists. And this goes back again to me. I would rather tell somebody about what my church does for me or how the church is in the world or how it makes me be in the world than what I believe as a Unitarian Universalist. Because I can't be a representative of all UUs because we believe different things. But I think we all are here on a common search, a common journey, and we can talk about that and how when we walked into a UU church it felt like home and why that was. And we share that experience. So an elevator speech was it's a way of evangelizing, I guess, being prepared for that question. It's like, what's a UU? But it's hard to do that.
One more
question?
Okay, this is a good closing question. What can be done to encourage more of our people to learn about our long history? So first you have to know that we have a long history. We're not just this new agey kind of thing that was invented in 1984. We've been around for a long time, and it's important to know that. I think that this actually goes back to the first question about our name. Knowing where we came from is important, even though we're in a very different place than where we started. We need to know our roots. It's like doing genealogical research in your family. Who knew that your third uncle twice removed fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War, and who knew that we have a faith that dates all the way back to the 16th century, and who knew that Theodore Parker used to write his sermons with a loaded gun sitting on his desk. It's just fascinating stuff, and so. I think it's just about being curious about where we came from. And there's a lot of books that have been written. You go to the UUA bookstore online. There's all sorts of opportunities to learn. If you haven't taken UU 101, we spend an hour talking about UU history, so I'll put a plug in for UU 101. It's important to know where we came from. James Reeb, preached here, and he was killed shortly after the Selma March. So yeah, our history is important, and all I could do is encourage you to dig into it a little bit. So those were great questions. What do you think? How'd it go?
Yeah, great questions.